You are listening to the Overwatch League Network, the podcast with Deadeye on all the Overwatch League news and information. The show with Tactical Visor on the statistics and analysis. Here are your hosts, Totally Drunk, Spider, and Slambo.
What is up, guys, and welcome back to Overwatch League Network, the podcast with Deadeye on all the latest Overwatch League news, information, and esports analysis. I am your host, Totally Drunk, and tonight on episode number 64, we'll be going around the league discussing the latest Overwatch League news. We'll take a look back at the Contenders Korea Grand Finals, in which all of the hosts are celebrating, and the hosts will share their Overwatch League Season 2 rankings for teams number 10 through number 6. But before we can get into the news and introduce you to my co-hosts, I just want to take a moment to thank everyone who is hanging out with us for our live show tonight on Twitch, some cases even in the audio abyss, and thank all of our repeat listeners. Unfortunately, Slambo is not here tonight. We hit a couple of snags audio-wise, so he's joining us in chat, trolling away as everything comes up Millhouse on his end, and we hope to have him back next week. It's not that he's not here, guys. He's just in chat. So that's unfortunate. And, we look forward to having Slambo back on next week. But joining me tonight is my other co-host, the YouTube wizard himself, Spider. And Spider, we've had some interesting things happening in the past week. We've had a tournament featuring hero bans and protects. We had a lot of regions wrapping up contenders. And, we got a couple of updates here and there with the Overwatch League. So how has this past week been treating you, my friend?
It was good. It was a good week in Overwatch. I mean, we got Korea Contenders, which was amazing, which we will talk about the grand finals there. You mentioned the Tournament of Future Champions with their bans and picks and, coaches sitting in their matches and stuff. And the funny part was everybody thought that would lead to this huge diverse meta. And what did it end up being?
Contender.
Teams protecting goats. Like, basically, that's all that tournament was, is this team good at goats? Okay, then we're going to protect goats and you can ban whoever you want. It came down to, and I haven't watched Sunday's matches yet, so I don't really know how that turned out, but I have a feeling it's going to be very similar. But it was good. I mean, it taught us a lot of lessons that basically bans and protects may not be the answer, but they can. I think the right system could lead to a little more diversity, but I think after this experiment that's not the answer. Teams are going to play what they're best at, and it actually is going to lead into one of our discussions a little later that, if a team is good at a certain composition, and that composition is very strong, and they've practiced on that composition, they're going to play that composition. There's no reason not to. I mean, it's like the Patriots. The Patriots are not going to stick to a ground game. They're going to throw the ball because that's what Tom Brady does, and that's what wins them games. Sure, the ground game's going to be put in there a little bit, and there's going to be times like maybe when you're close to the goal line or you're on, watch point Gibraltar, that you have to mix it up a little bit because it's not optimal for that situation. That's basically what compositions are going to be. So you're going to either adapt or you're going to be the Kansas City Chiefs. So, and I say that purely because Slambo's here and my team has been out for 2 weeks. So he can't fight back. But I am 100% with Slambo. I don't want to see the Patriots win another one. Sorry.
You're trying to make Slambo cry, as he's saying in Twitch chat.
Yeah.
So what I will note quickly about the Tournament of Future Champions is the fact that in both regions, we had a Contenders team taking it all. Now, I know this is a mixed Tier 2, Tier 3 tournament, but if they're going to have Contenders team in these tournaments, I would prefer them to be the teams that, probably couldn't win a match or maybe only have one win. Not a team that actually made it to the playoffs.
Phase
So,
2.
yeah.
Kungarna.
Well, it's phase 2 now, but I'm just saying, no, I don't like the fact that they had really good contender teams in this tournament that had a lot of, like, open division talent, essentially. So that was the thing. But go ahead.
There was some good competition. Like, it wasn't like they just rolled them over. Like, there was some good back and forth. But yes, it was the contenders teams that took it in the end. So I don't think it was as lopsided as you make it sound. Like, there was some pretty good back and forth. Some matches that had interesting strategies. So it's worth probably looking at the highlights, but you don't have to sit through the whole tournament.
It was like 7 hours too, by the way, so there is that. But anyways, let's go ahead and let's jump into this week's news as we go around the league. So first up, we did have a tweet sent out from Benchmob DC, who is one of the more prominent reporters out there for Overwatch League. And he says that he does have an update on the community countdown. Now, granted, this is not Overwatch League official yet, but it's still worth noting. This is set to take place between February 9th through the 12th, with Media Day on February 13th. So each team will play one practice match, and other events will include a Capture the Flag tournament between expansion teams, and we'll also be getting Ash and Anna paintball games. So a lot of the word going around is that the start of this preseason, and I'm going to use air quotes, is just due to the fact that several people began their visa application process late. So most are going to be arriving in the US over the next several weeks. So I know OG is in LA, we got the Chain-Do Hunters in LA, we got more staff members showing up. Effect is still in Korea, so we're still not quite sure what's going on there, but, like, it's important to note, like, sure, if you filed for, your visa around the same time as other players on your team, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to process and get approved the same time as well, so it's definitely something to be weary of, but I don't think it's quite time to panic just yet for Effect, but you still don't like to see that one way or another.
No, and it is sad that he's already had these problems, and we talked about this last week, but he's had these problems in the past, and then this is just compounding it. This is just another problem to add on to it. And if you follow him on Twitter, you can see he's been pretty down about it, and he's actually been like, and this really makes me feel like he's got like some kind of bipolar disease, because he flips between like really down about it and like really trolly about it, like really funny about it. So I feel bad for him, because like you said, he actually did his interview the same day as OG. So it's just sad that he's stuck there, but he'll get here eventually. And he practice, but Dallas has no shortage of DPS right now, and they're going to go into a not very DPS heavy meta. So I'm not real worried. Like, I was worried about OG not being here. Like, I kind of downplayed it because I didn't want to make a big deal about it, but I was sad that he wasn't here, because him not being here would have been a big blow. And again, that'll come up later. But I feel like that what he put out in the tweet, what Benchmark put out, and then sounds right. Like it lines up with what Nate said on Jade's stream. Jane specifically pushed like on a paintball, and Nate was like, yeah, I love that game mode. We could, definitely see if we can make that happen. And Ash being the same way, like Ash just adds another level of complexity, whether you hit the scoped or unscoped, which can be fun. And I was excited to hear that, if this becomes true, that each team will play one match, and they don't really specify what a match is, like, is that like a best of 3? Is that just like one round on freaking Control? Like, who knows? But we will see at least every team on the stage in some capacity if this ends up being true. And, that's basically all you really want for a preseason, because outside of that, you really shouldn't make any like jump to conclusions and stuff like that. Like, just remember that both Dallas and Houston last year's preseason were undefeated. So something like that. So, this sounds true, and I'm happy to believe it.
Yeah, Slambo is in chat, and he says that my take, I don't feel like the teams new to the scene are going to get a real taste of the level of competition. Still will be fun to watch. So yeah, like, they're not quite getting, like, a full weekend worth of playtime like we got to see in, the inaugural season, well, for the preseason anyway. But I'm looking forward to seeing how the Ash version of paintball is going to work out, just because, it's something that we're not quite used to seeing yet. And, even in the game nights, like, that's still not a mode that we've tried with that hero specifically. So I'm definitely going to be looking forward to that. But it does seem like it's going to be a hybrid of, some more nonchalant type events along with actual practice matches. It's just not like a tried and true preseason per se, as opposed to, what we're used to in traditional sports or even last preseason for the Overwatch League. But we do have some news out of Path to Pro, which is absolutely massive for really all the talent. So Path to Pro have added more LAN events in 2019. So we have all 8 regions that will be participating in inter-regional events called Showdown matches, and these will be a double elimination style bracket. So teams that perform best in Showdown will earn spots to compete in the Contenders Gauntlet event later in the year. So how is this going to work? So basically, Showdown is going to be divided into 2 divisions. You'll have the Atlantic Division, the Pacific Division, and these events will be held during the Overwatch League's mid-year break. So on the Pacific side, these will take place in China between May 24th through the 26th, and you'll have teams from Australia, Pacific, China, and Korea. So to look at the team breakdown, we'll have the top performer from Australia, the top team from Pacific, and then the top 2 from China and Korea. And then on the Atlantic side, this will be held May 31st through June 2nd. The location is still to be determined, but it's either going to be in Europe or North America. You'll have the top 2 teams from Europe, top 3 teams from North America, and then the top team from South America. So, at the end of the year, that's when we'll have the gauntlet. The details on this are pretty scarce right now, but it's going to be held October 10th through the 13th, and then that will be basically after the 2019 season of the Overwatch League, and then the teams that are in that will be determined based off of their performances in Showdown. But when we talk about Path to Pro, there was a lot of concern about LAN events. They were doing a lot of online playoffs. That was a huge change in Season 3, which just wrapped up. I mean, Korea had their LAN, and, there's been a lot of talks about Korea might even be going to online finals, which would be a huge blow to the Korean scene across the board, because, you look at the Korean Overwatch scene, and they're just used to playing in that environment. Just due to Apex, due to Contenders. Whereas a lot of the other regions didn't either have that option, or if they did, it would only be for, like, the grand finals, maybe the semifinals, and beyond. But it's just a completely environment one way or another. So, for a team out of, like, South America or Australia, this is a great opportunity to really showcase their talent, and it's coming outside of the World Cup, which was really the only other time where we got to see that sort of representation. So all in all, like, we got an expansion of LAN events for Path to Pro. We get champion versus champion type matchups, inter-regional, which is fantastic. And, this is going to be a chance for these lesser represented regions to really showcase their talent and open up the door for more teams to look to either maybe pick up a player, pick up a core of players, but one way or another, like, this is going to answer a lot of questions when it comes to not only ranking teams, but ranking where these teams stack up against other regions that, on paper, are a lot stronger than what they're competing in.
Yeah, this is basically something that the Overwatch community has been asking for since the dawn of competitive Overwatch. I mean, one of the biggest questions has always been, how do they stack up against each other? And outside of, Overwatch League or, prior to that, really nothing other than maybe the World Cup, there really hasn't given us a whole lot of insight of like how good EU is compared to Korea, and how good is North America compared to Korea. And so I mean, basically, like, we all kind of know that Korea is the strongest region at this point. But being able to see, like, on a tier 2 level how close they are will give teams a much better perspective on picking people up, because as we saw this offseason, most teams just defaulted to Korea. They were like, we're going to pick up Koreans because we saw what happened in season 1 and they look the best, and they've been the most dominant region. Whereas something like this can say, yeah, the Koreans are really good, but man, that EU is amazing. And some of the reasons that I think like Kib was picked up was because of his World Cup performance. Same thing with Cruz. Like, I feel like they were able to showcase this, and this, these showdowns are the perfect way to expand upon that and add a little bit more competitiveness to this. And hopefully they add, some kind of prize pool, so some of these regions can be like, hey, I'm making real money and not Blizzard bucks. The lower, I would say lower tiered regions, but the lower represented regions, a little more incentive to like really buckle down and try and get in there and really make a run for it. So overall, this is phenomenal news. Like, as soon as they made the announcement, like, everybody's like, tier 2 is saved and blah blah blah, and like all the coaches were coming out of the woodworks, and it was just funny. And I'm like, did you guys just forget all the like crap they did to tier 2? Like, this is really good, but they still got a long way to go. So I am happy to see that they are on that path of building tier 2 up to what it needs to be.
Yeah, now I nervously await whether there is any truth to Contenders Korea being taken online.
That would be very, very sad if that is true.
Absolutely. So I'm hoping for the best. I'm not very optimistic. Just based off of everything else that had happened, this prior season. But anyways, let's move on. Let's talk about a new sign-in for one of the expansion teams, and we turn to Chengdu Hunters. So, they have been on the free agency hunt, and they have turned to another former Miraculous youngster and Team CC main tank Jiqi Ren to add more depth to their roster. So, Jiqi Ren played for Miraculous youngster when they were the strongest team in China during 2017. Now, I know in the past, I was breaking down this roster, I was like, oh look, they have components from MY. But most of those sign-ins had not been competed in a year and a half at that point of sign-in. The good news is, with Jiqi Ren, he's actually been competing in Contenders China, so that is fantastic. He played for the Shanghai Dragons Academy team, Team CC. He was with them throughout the entirety of the year, played in all 3 seasons of Contenders this year. And this is the 3rd player signed from Miraculous youngster, and he'll be reunited under head coach RUI. So, Jiqi Ren is the 10th player to join the Hunters roster, who will be opening up their season against the Guangzhou Charge on February 15th. So, this gives them another main tank option, the other one being Amen. So, now this brings the question of, well, do we start Jiqi Ren over Amen just due to the fact that there's already established synergy with Leityun, or do you go with someone who is maybe a little bit more seasoned, maybe someone that they've already scrimmed with more already at this point? Like, what do you think the call is going to be in this situation?
Because MY's run through the Pacific region, specifically like during the Premier Series when MY was really at like the top of their game, he was a phenomenal Winston player. Like, he looked good on Winston. He flexed to the Reinhardt and he looked decent on that from what I remember recently. So I don't know how he's faring in like the GOATS meta, specifically in China, because China basically played GOATS and then they would play cheese. So it could go either way. I would probably start him just because of the pre-established synergy, but that could all change. Like, it can change based off of meta. It could change based off of time. Like, could have better synergy with Late Young at this point, just because, who knows how long he's actually been signed, how long they've scrimmed together, what conditions they've scrimmed under. There's a whole lot of factors that could go into this. If I had to base it, I would probably start him with Late Young if they could get that synergy back, because they were so dominant as a front line in the previous metas. But you do have a solid backup. That being said, I talked about Chengdu in our rankings. Them signing him as a tank player doesn't change them for me, because it doesn't answer any of my questions about them. It basically says, okay, well, they had a really good Winston player. Well, Winston's not going to be played as he was at one point. So I think this is a good pickup. Like, I think any team needs to have backups in positions. I just, I don't know enough about him to really say whether or not he's going to be that X factor. Like, is he going to be Fisher? Is he going to be, that level of catalyst to bring this team higher in the rankings? Because right now they're all pretty low in basically all the host rankings for our network. So we'll see. Like, I have hopes for the Hunters, but not as much as I do for other teams.
Absolutely. So in other Chinese news, we do know that the Guangzhou Charge are looking to field an academy team in Contenders China. I know they sent out a tweet earlier saying that they were looking for a head coach and a team manager, and the Charge so far look to be, the first expansion team looking to field an academy team this upcoming season in Contenders. So when it comes to the Contenders China region, that would make them the second academy team. The other, as we mentioned prior, is Team CC, who is the Shanghai Dragons academy team. So it's very important to note that when it comes to the 2019 Contenders Season 1, an academy team is guaranteed a spot. So they don't have to worry about, making their way up through Contenders Trials or an Open Division or anything like that. It's guaranteed, so they don't have to fight their way up. That being said, there is always a chance that they could get relegated after the first season, but at least it's not an initial concern from the get-go. But that being said, I know there's been a lot of talks about Leave being a target for the Charge Academy team, and if you're looking at prospects in the Chinese region, it's really hard to think of a better name to try to build a roster around, or at least, a bigger name in regards to, like, a star quality player for an expansion team for the Academy.
Leave would be a huge pickup for the Academy team, if nothing but name recognition. But I am really glad that they did pick up an Academy team, because I think all should take advantage of the Academy system, just because of the fact... Yeah. Okay. Slambo said, I'm not allowed to use the F word. And the F word is so good. The other one is still on the table. But going back to it, I am glad that an Academy team, because the Academy team, first of all, going into this, there's almost no downside. From what we heard, you don't have to pay the players that much. So there's that. You help the tier 2 scene grow. You have some more players under your brand. You just expand your brand. Like, there's really no doubt to going into an Academy team, because, like you said, they're in it already. Like, they don't have to qualify. You just get. So there's no downside to this, and I wish all of the teams would have taken advantage of this, but I'm glad the Charge did, because the Charge are one of the teams that I think have the possibility to grow into a strong Overwatch League team. And I think setting up a tier 2 scene will really help them in the long run.
So we got to look ahead a little bit, and we do have an update on what patch Overwatch League Stage 1 Season 2 is going to be played on. So last week, we saw Nate Nancer appear on Jane's stream during the Pro Pugs, and on stream he reiterated that the league goal was to better align Overwatch League patches with what is live in the game at that time. So on Thursday, Nancer tweeted that Stage 1 of Overwatch League's 2019 season will be played on the patch currently on the PTR. That includes the armor changes, the Brigida nerf, the Diva defense matrix nerf, and I'm not even going to bother to mention the other change because it's not really going to see any play at that level, but you guys know what I'm talking about. I mean, you probably heard Jake completely trash talk this particular hero, but the big question is, what is this going to mean for Stage 1? We're less than a month out. Maybe not having, that much time to scrim, or if we are scrimming, we're not doing that much innovation in regards to team compositions. So, Spider, in your opinion, does this guarantee that Stage 1 is going to be a GOATS-heavy meta?
Yes. Hey, say it. But you're absolutely right. Like this won't kill off GOATS immediately. This is a step in the right direction, and we talked about it last week when we talked about the initial PTR changes, and nothing has changed since then. We will see more strats be viable on certain maps, but GOATS has been practiced so much, it has been just slammed into these players' heads that they are going to default to GOATS if they are a competent GOATS team. Now, you will see certain teams, and this is going to happen with 20 teams in the league now, you will see certain teams default off of GOATS more than others because they don't feel like they're as good of a GOATS team. They don't feel, they feel like they could do better on other things. It's kind of like, think back to Stage 4 when Brigida first came in, and teams were defaulting to dive, and it wasn't working. That's going to happen in reverse this time. Teams are going to not feel confident, so they're going to default to something else. And it's not against GOATS in most situations. But with these changes, we will see more strats be viable on different maps. You can think maps like Junkertown, Watchpoint Gibraltar, maps that already have kind of pre-existing strategies, or like Anubis Point B, where the Reaper buffs might actually come into play. We will see niche strategies there in the beginning of Stage 1, and by the end of Stage 1, we will see a much bigger variety as teams practice more, expand on strategy, and we will see those teams that default to other strategies start having a little bit more success. But in the initial part of the season, expect to see a lot of like Zen Lucio GOATS. Like you may see the occasional Ana on certain maps. You may see Winston on certain maps instead of Reinhardt. We're not going to see too much of a change initially, but I think by the end, we will. So I am glad to see that they are taking a little bit more of a proactive approach with patching. I hope they can keep it up because that was my big complaint on the first season. So, all in all, this is a good start, but they still have a long road ahead of them to keep patching consistent to the level that it's going to need.
Yeah, what's interesting too is with the shorter stages, you're only playing 7 games per stage. It kind of makes it so, like, if you're trying to be innovative, like, if it doesn't pay off right away, you basically screw yourself out of any chance of making stage playoffs because you're only having, so many opportunities to pick up a win in the column. That being said, you're probably going to see a team, maybe a couple, that are going to just default to anti-GOATS compositions. And, Sombra is one of those heroes with these changes on the PTR who's going to get a sizable buff to armored targets. We might see a rise of the Sombra Pharah anti-GOATS compositions. That being said, though, you look back at the past 6 months, and this is the composition that teams have been practicing through and through. It's triple tank, triple support, they're running 303, and while sure, you might have some pocket threats on certain maps, say, First Point, Route 66, running quad DPS, it works fantastic, but it's not viable in a lot of different situations. So I feel like no matter what, out of the gate, we are going to be seeing heavy GOATS compositions. And maybe we'll see a patch getting deployed before the Stage 1 playoffs, maybe not, but Stage 1 primarily will be GOATS. And I do want to make note that Slambo is in chat with us, and Slambo says, the patch was made to drive viewership for Stage 1. They knew some new fans will show up, but they want the audience that feels lanes are sale to tune in too.
Absolutely. Yeah, the biggest thing I'm looking forward to hopefully is some of the tanks giving hamster-sized ball problems to back lines, because I'm really looking to see some Hammond play.
And that's the thing too. Like, we really haven't seen a ton of Hammond.
Mm-hmm. But he gets a significant boost to armor in this upcoming patch too. He based on headshots, he actually gets the most boost when attacking armor as long as he's hitting headshots. So he could become popular GOATS comp, because he was already kind of on that tipping point in an anti-GOAT before Doomfist was really squashed, because that Sombra Doomfist Hammond dive was like the initial, like, this is the GOAT's killer, and it worked against teams would have already beaten anyway. So I think people blew that out of proportion, but I think he is good against GOATs. So that I want to see some ball problems. That's what I want to see. Take that out of context.
Yeah, I mean, you might need to get that checked out. But moving on, we do have some more changes, and this one is outside or inside the camp of the Florida Mayhem. So, as of today, we are 23 days away from the start of Overwatch League Season 2. So we're less than a month out from the new season, and Florida Mayhem have parted ways with Coach Ryder. So, who's replacing Ryder? Well, they have turned to Mayhem Academy, and they have promoted the Mayhem Academy coach Promise. So looking back, Ryder first joined the Mayhem as an assistant coach following Stage 1, and at that point, Mayhem would go on to go 6-24 with Ryder on the coaching staff, finishing with an overall record of 7-33. So you look at Promise, who's been working with their academy team. He joined Mayhem Academy ahead of Contenders North America Season 3, which is the season that just wrapped up. And Mayhem Academy in North America struggled this year. They went 1-4. Their sole victory was against a team that went winless, that being Kungarna. And, we've already talked about Kungarna and how things spiral out of control for a certain content curator, besides the point. But Mayhem Academy failed to secure a playoff berth. So, with these moves, Mayhem remained at 3 coaches on their staff. You have Mineral, who is still serving as the head coach. You have Promise, who's going to take over as the assistant coach. And you have Robert Yip, who is the team's performance coach. Now, a lot of people have been talking about the timing of the release of Ryder being so close to the season, how that might impact the things. But really, the bigger thing is they just got rid of a Korean coach on a 95% Korean roster, and they're bringing in a coach out of EU. Do you feel like this is going to create a rift because of the communication on this team? Or do you think that a fresh start with a new mind is more beneficial in this situation?
I think you have to kind of go with the second one. Like, I think the fresh outlook has to be better for the team, because they wouldn't have done this otherwise. Like, they wouldn't have, cut loose their only Korean coach if, things were at least looking decently. Like, things had to be pretty bad, or at least not to an acceptable where they would make this move this close to the season. And, they put out like the PR statement, and, like, we wish we would have, communicated this better over time, like really gave you more of an insight on how things look internally, and, all the normal PR stuff. But you could tell, like, all of that was just a smokescreen for them saying, like, look, he wasn't working. Rather than wait, we just got rid of him now. We're going to move forward, and this is going to be better for the organization. But as a whole, if you're a Florida fan, all 4 of you, you should be worried. Like, last season they made bad decisions. Off season, everybody was kind of scratching. They made upward movement, but it wasn't the upward movement that they needed. At least not enough of it. And the whole organization just kind of reeks of like lack of confidence. And like I said, if you're a fan, you should probably be worried. Like, I agree with Slambo in chat. Like it is better now than later, but it doesn't bode well for the team as a whole. Like it's like no team gets rid of their coach this close to a season and typically has a good season. Like it's just if they do, phenomenal. Like that's a great decision. Maybe he wasn't doing what he was supposed to, and they said, "All right, he's dead weight, cut him loose." I don't know. It kind of knocks them even lower, and they're already pretty low on the power rankings list. Like most of us put them in last or second to last, and this doesn't help that. This just brings them down even lower. So I feel like they made the right choice if he wasn't working out, but as a whole, I still feel for this team.
For me too, it's a transparency issue with the Mayhem, because at one point they were basically saying like, yeah, like we're still gonna, we're still gonna have a strong presence. We're not gonna be an all Korean team, and they went out, they signed a bunch of Korean talent, and then they got rid of a Korean coach, and then this just happened so late. It's not a good look for the Florida Mayhem in that regard. And if I was going to bring someone into the coaching staff, I understand why they want to promote someone that's already within the organization. But if you watch Mayhem Academy this season in Contenders North America, you would be scratching your head right now because they did not look good at all. This was a team that tried to not really play the meta. They tried to run a lot of anti-GOATS compositions and didn't work. They tried to run GOATS compositions and they got outclassed pretty much every single step of the way. So while Promise may have a lot of the community around him, I don't have a lot of confidence in this organization from the top to bottom, and it still kind of brings us back to the fact that, even on the coaching side of things, this team is still working with not a ton of pieces in regards to, like, who they have to work with. On the roster, they're looking good, but the coaching staff is still pretty light compared to some of the other teams in the Overwatch League. So, I don't know if this is going to be a good move or a bad move for Florida Mayhem, but all four of you, and I don't know who they are anymore, it's hard to keep track, but if you are a Mayhem fan, it's definitely a sign to be concerned with. But I would just hope in the future that Mayhem can be a bit more transparent with some of the stuff that's going on behind the scenes, or at least give a reason behind it. That way it's just not a reason to cause panic within the organization or even the fan base.
So Tavik, stage 2? Is that what we're looking at?
To get released?
No, to move to head coach.
Oh, to get head coach.
Like
maybe maybe head chef?
Yeah. Head driver, chef, coach, and lead DPS.
See, that's the other thing that we've never discussed. Will the Mayhem organization actually get them a spot closer to the Blizzard Arena? Or are they going to have to drive the bus again? Like, you would just have to imagine, like, the morale. Like, how that affected the morale on this team, knowing that one of the players has to drive them, an hour and a half to and from the place that they're staying.
Oh, yeah, it's horrible having to drive yourself to work, and then drive yourself home from work. Like, that's awful. I can't believe anybody would do that. Oh.
But it's more so
I do feel for them.
It's the meme aspect of it, though. Like, how much does that weigh down on Tavik?
Yeah.
But anyways, that's pretty much it for the Overwatch League news. So let's go ahead, let's shift gears, let's talk a little bit about what went down this past week in Contenders Korea, because we just got out of the grand finals, and it was Runaway coming out on top, defeating Element Mystic 4-1 to become the Season 3 champions. So, back-to-back. Runaway Season 2, won the championship, got signed to Vancouver Titans as an entire roster, +1. And then Runaway reforms. They sign an entirely new team, only sign 6 players, no substitutes. Our team mom, Flowervin, was there the entire way. Runaway goes on to go undefeated in the group stage and just clears out the playoffs. Like, none of us expected this.
Nope.
At all. Like, we were weary going in, just like we were with Kontu Panthera, because they too underwent the same thing, and the results between the two teams was pretty drastic.
Mm-hmm.
So, before we talk about, some of the stuff that went down in the grand finals, I do have a couple of notes. On this Runaway roster, there were only 2 players that are eligible for Overwatch League Season 2. You have the flex tank QOQ, who primarily plays D.Va, and then you have the flex support, who played a ton of Zenyatta, that was being Gangnam Jin. So those are the only 2 players that are eligible to get picked up mid-season or at any point, during the season, so that's important to note. You got Hizu, Shui, and Li Jae not eligible until Season 3. But I have to say, like, there were so many key moments in this series, but at the end of the day, this just reconfirmed my love for this team. I will never stop loving this team. It's still, despite, like, the complete overhaul, the new Runaway roster is looking fantastic. They had all of the former Runaway players on hand to watch and support the team in the grand finals. And throughout all of this, like, they've still kept that sort of, like, family value and spirits intact, which is so important, because that's really what brought this team, so much fanfare and support from the community. And, like, when we saw, like, the trophy coming out, which wasn't the actual trophy, by the way, because there was a delay in the shipping, but Runaway and Breaking Things, when they are celebrating, I mean, you can't really name a more iconic duo in Contenders Korea, but...
At least no one got punched in the face this time.
This is true. But it's just... I feel for Element Mystic. This is an organization that seemed to make a run quite often in the playoffs, and they end up losing. Whether it's them choking, or whether it's them just getting bested, you can make an argument for either or. But when you look at Hizu basically went from being 4th DPS on Element Mystic to defeat an Element Mystic in the grand finals. And I can only imagine, like, how surreal that was for him, just one-upping his former team.
By far, like, it was it wasn't the closest match. Like, it definitely wasn't as close as Season 2 with Runaway and KDP. It was definitely more one-sided as the night went on. Like, the first map, the control map, was fairly close, fairly even. Element Mystic did take that one, and then we went into Numbani, and it just, like, Runaway just shit drive. They said, hey, you remember that stall we did at the beginning of the season on point A, where we basically hold them with one person and they don't get the point? Let's just do that again. And they did. Like, it was phenomenal to watch. Like, Mag just popped Primal Rage and was like, okay, I'm just going to exist here until the rest of my team comes back. And, like, they did nothing about it. It was phenomenal. Like, you mentioned QOQ for Season 2 in mid-season pickups, and he might absolutely be picked up. Were phenomenal. Like, Joe says in chat, like, his bombs were always on point, picking up 2 or 3, or even when it was picking up 1, it was like picking up a key support or a key tank or stuff like that. And some of them was due to boops, some of them was due to placement, but a lot of it has to do with his timing. Just the way he drops the... He knew to look for cooldowns. It was just a treat to watch. Like, the whole match as a Runaway fan was great to watch. Like, if you're an Element Mystic fan, your night definitely went south really quickly. But it was a good match all around. Like, and even though the score was 4-1 in some of the later maps, like, I would specifically say the last map weren't super close. Like, Element Mystic wasn't really out of it. Like, you really couldn't tell until the last map that they were having trouble. But it it kind of came down to what we talked about last week. Like we talked about Sparkle's Doomfist, and now how they answered it. And I loved the way they answered it. They basically said, "Look, all right, Sparkle's going to get in there, and he's going to kill at least one of us. So as long as we kill more of them than he kills of us, we're good."
Mm-hmm.
And that's essentially what they did. They said, "All right, Sparkle Dove, go murder Mag, like just murder them." And that's how it worked until the point where Sparkle became hesitant when he was on Doomfist. Been at the absolute worst times, and then just get eliminated, and that led to lack of changing. Like that, they totally outplayed Sparkle. Though Sparkle was still playing phenomenal on Doomfist for I'd say 4 out of the 5 maps. He still did everything he did before. The only thing was Runaway just kicked up the aggression and said, so what? Okay, yeah, you killed our Zenyatta. Good for you. You killed 5 of your team, so now you're the only one left. So have fun rocket punching back to spawn. And it was like, that was not the strategy I expected them to take. And it was so like opening to see them take that approach, because like you never think about that. You think about like trading and counter diving and stuff. And as like a coach, I think about how to counter that kind of stuff. That never popped into my head. Like, okay, as soon as he dives, just murder the rest of the team. Like it's like old school Pharah like strategy. Like the Pharah's in the air, so just kill the team on the ground, and then okay, cool, the Pharah's still shooting at us, but what is she going to do? So it was fun to watch. Like just all around, it was fun to watch.
Yeah. So the response to Sparkle's Doomfist by pretty much every other team was to just stay and spawn.
Yeah. Play defensive.
Right. It's just that was like the biggest X factor that we talked about last week. It's like, okay, what's the answer going to be for Sparkle? And Sparkle did everything he could. I mean, he was getting the value that he needed, but the trades were not even on both sides. So looking back at Numbani, and really, like, when you talk about defensive plays and being clutch in a moment, Runaway on that map are second to none. In that stall situation, they'd already lost 3. Mag just pops Primal Rage on the point, buying time for the reinforcements, which leads into the EMP bomb combination. And then you just see the support line coming in, they find 3 frags, and then that extends that defense. And it's just like, any other team would have been done at that point. There was no coming back from that, but Runaway finds a way every time. And the other thing I want to point out about Sparkle is Legion Tower and the approaches that Runaway were taking. It seemed like Element Mystic just didn't know where to place themselves. And every time that Runaway would re-engage, they would go out a different doorway. So Sparkle was having a hard time, or just the entire Element Mystic team was having a hard time knowing where exactly the engage is actually going to be coming from. So it was a lot of second guessing, and it made him hesitate on when they were actually going in. So the timing was really off in that situation. All in all, though, this was not a very close series. Sparkle had some great plays, but Takoyaki, compared to Mag, it was night and day difference between those 2 tanks. And I have to say, the shatter that was on Dorado from Mag was one of the most ridiculous things I have ever seen, because he gets knocked back, and he has the sense to... he's looking up at the time because he's getting knocked up in the air, but he still lines up his shatter and he drops everyone. And I've never seen such an instant reaction on a shatter like that before, and it just blew my mind.
Threw it a sweet little 360 in there. I wish that would have been hilarious. But Slamo pointed out in chat too, they basically crumbled around Takoyaki. He is a good tank player, but he just could not keep up with this front line. And part of that falls back on Sparkle, because Sparkle, was typically his Zarya player, and Sparkle was the better Zarya player on the team. Sparkle, when he was on Zarya, looked really good, The problem was they stuck on that Doomfist comp for too long, and it put them too far behind. And it just gave Runaway the confidence to really just get in their face. So even when they did switch to goats, like they didn't look as good as they had in the past. So all in all, it was a phenomenal mind game from Runaway, and it just reinforced how good of a front line they really did have.
Absolutely. So with that being said, definitely go back, check out Runaway, just decimate into EM, see how many times Sparkle can't get as many kills as an entire team. Crazy, right? Like, who would have thought? That was the answer. Just kill more people, Forehead. That's all you need to do. But anyways, this is going to lead into our main discussion for this week, which, of course, will be our continuation of our host rankings ahead of Overwatch League Season 2. So tonight, we'll be taking a look at our ranks from number 10 through number 6. So, Spider, why don't you kick us off with your 10th seed for Overwatch League Season 2?
So my seed, the Dallas Fuel. And this may some people because I am the resident Dallas Fuel fan. But, they made some interesting changes over the offseason. I think they were all pretty much upgrades, like except for maybe RCK, just because we lost Seagull, and it's going to be hard to fill the big brain shoes that was Seagull. But I think RCK will have a chance to come into that role. I think Closer was a good pickup. Zachary is, but I'm not 100% convinced on that. We also dropped Chips, and we put Coco into a coaching role, which isn't surprising considering, he basically didn't play the first season almost at all. But the rest of the team, the core unit remains the same. We got Taimu, Effect, Mickey, Harry Hook, AKM, OG, Unco, like basically all the people you were used to seeing are there. Basically our stage 4 roster, and the team is going to look to kind of expand on that. But honestly, like I had to put them in the middle just because they did show an uptick in stage 4, but they didn't make a whole lot of moves in the off season, and I think they do have potential, but not as much potential as some of the other teams. And, that's hard to say as a Dallas Fuel fan. So I figured, dead in the middle. Expectations are extremely, tempered over this season. If they go up, phenomenal. If they go down, if they only have 10 more spots to drop, so they're basically back where they were in Season 1. So I put them dead in the middle.
All right, for my 10th spot, this was a hard choice because I feel like this team can be a lot better than where I've ranked them, and that is the Los Angeles Valiant. So when we look at the offseason, not like the most movement in regards to additions to the Valiant. They did pick up Kuki, who was on the Seoul Dynasty last season as their backup main tank. And, they traded soon over to Paris Eternal. Finzi also went to Paris Eternal. Numlocked, who was dropped, was competing in Contenders EU for British Hurricane. Verbo was on, one of the 89 people on the Skyfox's roster for Contenders North America, which didn't help them. But, they kept a lot of their core pieces. They kept Agilities, they kept their front line of Space and Fate. They have Kariv, Bunny, Custa, KSF, and Izayaki. So, the big question mark is, how big of a loss is Soon? That's going to be one of the major stories. Soon, on Tracer, not the best, not the worst, but, he was good to great. He did have those moments where he would sneak in the back cap. Sometimes that worked out, sometimes it didn't, but, it's a distraction. It opens up some space in some ways. And KSF, there's a lot of question marks about him. Like, is he going to be taking over the hit scan role now that Soon is on Paris Eternal? I'm not convinced. Basically with anything I've seen out of KSF, both at the Contenders level and also what we have seen from him in the Overwatch League. So what does that mean? Well, it means that Kariv switching back to DPS. I'm very confident that that's going to be the move that they make, and we even saw in the Pro Pugs. With the Pro Pugs, Kariv was often one of the early choices because of the flexibility that he has. We've seen him play hit scan. we've seen him play on the support line. And when it comes to the Valiant, they have really been pushing Izayaki on their social media. They're trying to get him to the forefront, which makes you assume that he is going to be the starting flex support on this roster. So in order for the Valiant to really maintain that momentum that they had in Season 1, which this was not a bottom tier team or middle of the pack team. This is a team that consistently performed well. And while they didn't always mean success in the playoffs, they were still one of the elite teams. So if I'm looking at the Valiant, a lot of this is going to boil down to that flex support role and how Izayaki is going to do once he actually sees play time. But I fully expect Kareev to start over KSF. And that front line, Fate and Space, that's an elite front line. I don't know where I'd rank them overall, but it would be hard not to put them in the top 3 across all of the Overwatch League. And regardless of who's on that DPS line, they're going to be getting the opportunities that they need to work with, and a lot of it's going to boil down to Fate and Space on just how far this team can possibly go in the near future.
Yeah. So I will get to the Valiant in a moment, but my number 9 pick is the Shanghai Dragons, which you're probably like, oh, wow, that's really high for a team that hasn't won a game yet. But you got to remember they did pick up, basically the runner-ups to Korea, Contender Season 2, almost wholesale, is basically the whole team -1. Overall, like they're going to look to be a much better team. They kept Gaguri, they kept, basically the good players from the first season, the ones that kind of had a chance to stand out. Fearless. Dia, that's the one I was looking for. Fearless was, Fearless was kind of iffy, but they did drop Otto, which was the weird thing, that kind of perplexed the rest of us because Otto was the other one that was kind of like the standout. But they did bring in some heavy hitters, so I think this team has a chance to do well. The only reason I kind of ranked them tentatively compared to, say, their counterparts, which would be the Titans, because that was who beat them in Korea Contender Season 2. But outside of that reason is the organization. Like Shanghai, to me, feels a lot like Florida. Like the organization just doesn't seem like it's got the infrastructure behind it. It's made some weird decisions in the past, and I don't have the confidence to say that they've fixed that yet. Because we don't know. Like a lot of these Chinese teams are very silent, at least in terms of stuff that I can actually read. So we just don't know. Like this team could be a top 3 team if that KDP core roster performs at their what we expect from them. But it's really the organization that's kind of holding me back. So I had to drop them down a bit. But this team could surprise us, or they could kind of fall from grace again. But I feel like 9's a good tentative level. And I honestly, like we kind of talked about this when we started this, but like any team from I'd say 13 to probably 6, you could probably interchange them, and any of us would say, yeah, that looks right. So I went with 9 for Shanghai. What about you?
For myself, I went with your team in blue, Dallas Fuel. So I'm not going to go over all the changes with this roster because you already basically knocked all that stuff out. So the things I'm looking at is, for one, the strength of Dallas Fuel to me is never going to be their roster. It's always going to be their coaching staff. You look at Arrow, you look at Jane. These are big brain coaches, and there is no doubt in my mind that Jane is going to be a head coach.
Oh, for sure.
It's going to happen in Season 3, without question. So a lot of this is just going to boil down to my trust in that system and just the mentality of both of those guys, because they have proven success. And we saw the momentum that this team was able to build in Stage 4. And I do want to touch up, when we look back at Stage 4, Dallas Fuel were playing Brigitte more than any other team by a wide margin. It wasn't even close. And a lot of teams were not able to adapt. So if there's a team out there that's going to look to maybe rattle the cages a bit and experiment with team compositions, Dallas Fuel might be the team to do it. Like, they have Zachary. Like, we've seen the shenanigans that Fusion University try to implement into their gameplay when they know that... Well, like, there are times where, like, well, we already know we're going to win the GOATS battle. Let's do something cheeky and run some Metro Bastion comps or bunker comps. It doesn't always work, but they always have that in their pocket. So the experimentation factor from Arrow specifically on this coaching staff is always going to be there. Now, is it going to translate well to the Overwatch League? I'm not 100% sure, but it's always like that extra layer of depth that this roster is going to be able to bring. Now, that being said, yes, part of me is concerned about effect. That's always going to be there. Whether it's mental health, whether it's, maybe he's not going to get there on time for the start of Stage 1, I don't know. But for me, if I'm looking at this roster, I'm not as concerned with Zachary as I am with RCK, and I only say that due to the fact that RCK has not really proven himself against the top talent in the world. So this is going to be a pretty big testing ground for him, but I think he's going to be up to the challenge. It's just a matter of what sort of rotation are we going to be seeing from that flex tank role. Are they going to bring in Zachary to play Brigitte, or, maybe they'll flex Mickey to that role. They can do either way. Both of them have been known to play Brigitte, so it's really a toss-up in that sense. But, if you go out of your way and you pick up Zachary, and the head coach, Arrow, has already worked with Zachary, it's hard-pressed not to start Zachary on that DPS role, or on Brigitte for that matter. So I'm looking forward to seeing what he is going to be bringing to the table this season. But I have a feeling like when it comes to Zachary, out of the gate, people are just going to look back to the World Cup and use that as the way to judge him. That's the freshest thing in their mind. Not a lot of people watch Contenders. They don't see the track record that he had on Fusion University. They don't know his hero pool, so they're just going to turn back to the thing that hurt them the most, and that was North America losing, So, Zachary, despite not having a lot of LAN experience, is also going to be kind of one of the question marks, and I have faith that he'll be able to turn the ship around, and I'm expecting Dallas Fuel to be able to ride the momentum that they did build in Stage 4.
I hope so. I mean, I want them to win. They're my team, so my number 8 is a team you've already talked about. It's the LA Valiant, and basically for all the reasons you said, except I weight the loss of Soon a little less impactful than you did. Like, that's honestly the only change in my reasoning over yours, is I don't think Soon being gone is going to affect them that much. Like, I think they could easily still be a top 5 team as long as KSF and Kareev do what they need to do on DPS, because Agilities is steadily getting over his jitters. Like, he's steadily becoming more consistent, and he was always like a pop-off potential player, which every team needs. So I think as long as they can put somebody behind him that has consistency, I think this team could do very well. So that's why I put him at 8.
All right, and for myself at number 8, I have the Sold Dynasty. So, a lot of movement out of the Dynasty during the offseason. They added Fisher. Obviously, that was probably the biggest sign-in in the offseason altogether. I mean, let me rephrase that. Individual sign-in. Because the biggest.
Should I bleep it out every time you say Fisher?
I can do that myself. Thank you very much. I mean, to be fair, Slambo said only you can say the F word. He didn't say anything about me because he knows that I'm a soulmate and you're not. So that gives me, the green flag. So we added Fisher. We picked up Michelle, Marvel, Jexay, and the Open Division unknown factor of Fitz. So who did we drop? Kuki went to the Valiant, Zephyr went to the Mayhem, Guido went over to the Justice, And then we kept Zunba, Ryojaehan, Toby, Fleta, and Munchkin. So, what are we looking at for the Dynasty? Well, we're looking at aggression on the front line. Fisher plays very aggressive, and, we haven't seen a ton of stuff from the Dynasty outside of the show match, or the Pacific Showdown, whatever it was, but we did see a more aggressive Dynasty, and that's definitely something that's going to be brought to the forefront as long as Fisher is playing. So it's a different approach from the Dynasty, and it's really just a matter of how that's going to work. But off of that aggression comes more opportunities for Fleta, and I'm excited about that. I really hope we get to see the return of the Fleta meta, but at the end of the day, one of the things that hurt the Dynasty in Season 1, was a mixture of the front line and also a lot of subbing in and out in regard to the support line. And you can argue, maybe the support heroes that were in the meta at the time weren't the strong suit of Ryojaehan and Toby. Now we're in 303. It's looking a lot better. We've seen Anna start to pop up more on certain maps, which is a very good sign if you have Ryojaehan on that roster. And we've seen Munchkin play on Zarya, the high energy, the constant pickups, the clutch ability that he has had to secure kills, even despite being down a few players on the Dynasty. So if we're looking at how Dynasty is going to fare early on, we need to win the fight up front. And Fisher being added to this lineup, adding some additional tank firepower, is going to help propel this team, and it's going to be hard-pressed for Dynasty not to make some sort of playoff run this season with this roster. I love the moves that they made, and I have this feeling like, this could be it. If there's going to be a win or a playoff berth, it's going to be with this team when, the meta is more tailor-suited to the roster. You're muted, by the way.
Yeah, look at that. Now you can hear me. Like I said, if you missed all that, go back and read my lips. But I think it's interesting that we rated each other's teams higher than we rated them ourselves, which is just funny to me because we are our biggest critics, I guess.
Right.
I agree with a lot of your reasoning, but I actually put Soul pretty high. Like I'm not even going to talk about them tonight. So that's how high I put them up there. But moving on to my number 7, I put the Philadelphia Fusion, which might surprise some people since they were runner-up last season. But, in the off-season, they put Elk on a 2-way, they put Snillo on a 2-way, they dropped Hotba and Shadowburn. That was pretty much all the moves they really made. Like, that would affect their starting lineup. They did drop Joe Meister, but so what?
Yeah, he's coaching collegiate now.
Yeah, which is cool. He's actually coaching collegiate very close to me in Pennsylvania, which is kind of funny. But their big problem in season 1 was their consistency. Like we always talked about, like this was a team with unlimited potential, unlimited power, and all that meme nonsense. But they weren't consistent. Like when they played really well, they looked like a number 1, number 2 team. When they didn't play well, like say the Overwatch League Season 1 finals, they looked not good. Like they looked like a bottom 6 team, and it's always a toss up. Like which Philadelphia Fusion am I going to get? And I'm still not convinced they fixed their consistency issues. So even though they did finish as a runner up in Season 1, I'm kind of putting them a little bit lower than most people would have expected. That being said, they absolutely have the possibility to finish, 1 or runner up again. Like that upper potential is still there. It's just, they got to fix the consistency. So I put them at 7.
Ouch. You might be getting some tweets about that one. I'm just saying, could happen.
Don't at me.
Oh, at him. Do it. But anyways, at number 7, I have the Hanzhou Spark. And I'm really excited about this team. Like, this is the other expansion team that I'm most intrigued by, and no, it has nothing to do with the fact that they stole my team's colors. I'm not bitter, not anything like that. But you have Gushue, you got No Smite, Rhea on the tank line. For the supports, you got IDK, Revenge, and Bebe. Then you have a DPS quad of Adora, Bazi, Godsby, and Crystal. Alright, so Gushue made a splash in the Overwatch World Cup on Team China. Now it's time for the tsunami. It's going to happen. If you're looking at a Rookie of the Year frontrunner, Gushue is going to be the guy. Or the Winston, primarily.
If he gets playtime.
If he gets playtime. Which he probably will. I mean, you don't go out and, like, look for Chinese representation and then not play Gushue. So, take that for what it is worth. So, for me, the other thing, speaking of the other tanks, No Smite, to me, was one of the biggest snubs out of Overwatch League Season 1. I was shocked that No Smite didn't get picked up at all. Whether it was at the start of the season, mid-season, he was snubbed, as was Godsby. So, the redemption arc is going to be in full swing for them. But the person that I'm really looking forward to seeing on this roster is Crystal. Crystal brings that flexibility. You know, it's another one of the standout DPS players out of China. And in this situation, I feel like Crystal is going to be the must-start out of that DPS quad because of the amount of heroes that are in this pool. But, like, if we're looking at this team across the board, they're pretty solid at each position. It's kind of hard to, like, rank them, like, overall at each one, but they have elite players basically at every main role, which is very important. And out of the expansion teams, like, I have them second overall behind, you know, this should be no surprise if you followed this podcast at all. But, you know, the team that I support, you know, the team's shirt that I'm wearing right now in the deep blue, you know. Oh, you're wearing Bob. I mean, Bob's good. Bob's good, but, you know, he's no Titan.
Oh, man. So, going off of that, my number 6 is the Hangzhou Spark.
Wow.
Because ditto, I mean, like everything you said, like high caliber DPS, great tanks, great supports. Like the only thing that really made me rank them higher is I guess I have slightly more faith in them. I don't know. Like I don't know. Like I said earlier, like these teams could be mixed around, and almost everybody on this podcast would be like, yeah, that looks good. I am excited to see Crystal. I do hope Gushue plays because then we will hear Totem talk about him every week because he has not stopped talking about him since the World Cup. Because prior to the World Cup, go listen to our panels. That's all he talked about on the pre-BlizzCon panel was Gushue every chance he could get. So I hope that the Gushue tsunami continues. So I think this team has a lot of potential, and I am excited for them. And I'd be lying if I said that I haven't already bought a couple of their skins. And it wasn't just because my daughter made me buy the pink skins. But Slambo in chat posted his 10 through 6. He has the LA Valiant at number 10. He has the San Francisco Shock at number 9. So he will be the one angering Shock fans this time around. He has the Dallas Fuel at number 8. He has the Fusion at 7. See, look. See, you can't at me alone now because he ranked the Fusion the same place I did. And then he has the Spark at number 6. So he didn't post his reasoning, so you can ask him on Twitter. I assumed those are just, ordered by what color he likes the best. So I don't know any different, so I can't say any different, but there you go.
I find it funny that you're like, oh, people can at him about the Shock ranking, yet if you listened last week, everyone already knows that you ranked them the lowest. Because you had him at number 11. No, I'm calling you out on it. trying to send the angry mob over into the abyss.
I said this week he would anger the Shock fans this week. So, I mean,
I don't think they're going to move on.
No, probably not. I will say I haven't gotten any kickback from that yet, and I'm sure I'm asking for it by saying that. But see, I always qualify my sentences like I am sad to rank the Shock as low as I did, and I hope they do better, and their DPS is overrated, but something. I don't remember my reasoning at this point, and it's midnight here, so it probably wasn't good to begin with.
Probably not. I mean, it probably wasn't sound to begin with. Speaking of the Shock, though, I actually have them at number 6 overall, and you might be wondering, G Totem, why did you rank the Shock higher than every other network host?
So you got the less shit about them. I'm sorry. So you got the less about them. There you go.
That was clearly the reasoning behind it. You know, that was my master plan. So all the pro Sinatra community members can stop sending me hateful messages that clearly had no sway with my rankings whatsoever, guys. Trust me. So anyways, the Shock. We look at this team. They added Smurf, Rascal, Violet, and Striker, what they got from a trade from the Boston Uprising. They moved Dante over to the Outlaws, who will play something other than just Tracer. I don't know why people keep fixating on that. That's besides the point. We know he plays a really good Sombra, guys. Come on. They dropped IDDQD, Nomi, and Dak. And, of course, they kept a lot of the core. They kept Baby Bay, Super, Sleepy, Sinatra, Nefix, Architect, Moth, and Choi Hyo Bin. Okay, so why do I have the Shock at number 6? For starters, Krusty. I have a lot of faith in Krusty with what he was able to do with Boston. And, that was a team that we're like, okay, not really expecting much here. And completely shattered our expectations. I feel like when you look at this roster, outside of the main tank, now this is the one downside of this team. The main tank position is definitely reason for concern, but at every other rank or every other position, they have top potential, regardless of what role it is. And while, yes, they have a ton of DPS, and I know that could be reason for concern, and, where's everyone going to fit into this? The amount of flex options that this team does have is pretty good. At the end of the day, though, we talked up the Shock at times in Season 1, and, we had that wait-in period. We're like, okay, we gotta wait towards the end of the season, where they can get more of their pieces added to the puzzle. We'll see how they do then. And they were still pretty shaky. But I feel like Violet's coming in. It's so hard to gauge who's going to start at flex support on this team, because Violet and Sleepy are both fraggers. Like, I feel like you can start either one of them any day of the week, so I don't know what's going to happen there. But Striker is absolutely massive, and yes, I do in fact prefer to see him play over Sinatra. I would hate for the bench to just be worth $150,000. That might happen. But, we've seen these different GOATS variations. We've seen a lot of Mei getting subbed into the equation to replace a D.Va player. And if you need a good Mei player, they have one on this team in Rascal. So I'm looking forward to seeing how this team is going to adapt, how they're going to run variants, and if they can shore up that main tank position, which is my biggest concern at the end of the day, this team should be able to excel. Will they be able to? I don't know, but I have a lot more faith going into this season for the Shock than I did in Season 1.
That's fair, because they didn't have a whole team going into Season 1. I can't disagree with it, because I feel like I could have rated the Shock higher. I just didn't. Sorry. I think the community as a whole is overvaluing the Shock, because if you look at a lot of like the rankings across the board, some people have the Shock as high as like number 3, which is, cool, I guess. I mean, I don't see the logic behind it, but if they turn out to be a top 3 team, that's great, because I think the younger teams especially like younger local teams, will do a lot to generate views for Overwatch League. But I don't think they're there yet. Like, I don't think the Shock are quite there yet. And I think the main tank is the reason for that. So next week, I am highly excited because next week we get into the upper echelons debate. And while we all kind of agreed, the top 2 teams, the rest of them are all fairly different. So I'm excited to get into next week's. And it brings us 1 week closer to the community countdown in Overwatch League.
Absolutely. So with that being said, guys, we're going to go ahead and close out the show for tonight. So if you guys want to help us out, one of the best ways to do that is to go leave us a review over on iTunes. We're always looking for feedback and constructive criticism to offer us insight on how to improve the show and make for a better listening experience for you. If you guys want to find more Overwatch content, be sure to check out Overwatch Recall, which is our list of Overwatch, Overwatch League, and Path to Pro podcasts over on our website at owlnshow.com/OWRecall. And then every Sunday night, we release episodic listings of all the podcast episodes out there that were released, in that week span. I know this past week we had like 25 different podcasts release a new episode. Of course, some of those are multi-episode releases, so that episodic listen does jump a little bit, but a ton of great content out there. Be sure to check it out, including a new Fantasy Overwatch League show. I'm just saying, OWL by the numbers. It's out. It's part of our network. Go check it out. There's some pretty good people in there. Some people that you might be able to troll quite mightily.
Boy, I'm not going to dissect that sentence because there's only 4 of you. So one person is really going to be left out of that sentence.
But anyways, if you guys want to support us, you can also support us in other ways outside of, subbing to us over in Twitch with their Twitch Prime, which is free, by the way. Go ahead, do that now. But you can support our network via Patreon. So if you want to show additional support, we have tiers starting at just $1 a month. More info can be found at patreon.com/OWL network. And Spider, we have so many ways where our listeners can get a hold of us. Why don't you let them know how they can do that?
Sure thing. If you'd like to email the show, you can do so at contact@owlnshow.com. Our website is www.owlnshow.com. Our Twitter is @OWLNshow. Our YouTube is youtube.com/Overwatch League Network. Discord, you can find us on discord.me/OWLNshow. We're always there to talk, answer questions. If you want to, flame me for my picks, that's, an easier place to do on Twitter. Or you can do it on Twitter too. I don't care. You can find us on Twitch. If you're listening to the audio, I highly, highly advise you to check out our Twitch page because it is going to be very busy pretty much every day of the week now. In most instances, our Twitch is twitch.tv/OWLNshow. We are a Twitch affiliate, so you can show your support and subscribe to the channel. Like you said, you can throw a Twitch Prime our way. It's free if you're an Amazon Prime member. You can get our network emoticon and, support the podcast network. So what is the podcast network? Well, we have a bunch of stuff. So Monday nights at 7 p.m. PDT is Overwatch League Network. That is, the show where we talk about Korean contenders, the Overwatch League, and all basically the pro side of things. Then on Tuesdays is our new show, as Tona mentioned, at 6 p.m. PDT is Owl by the Numbers, which is the fantasy Overwatch podcast. And as Overwatch League gets, more into swing, they will, give you like player of the week and all kinds of stuff and answer questions live on the show. Like, technology is amazing. So definitely check that out if you're into the fantasy side of things. And if you're not, I'd say check it out anyway, just because you might end up liking it. Then Wednesdays we have Heroes Never Die, which is the variety Overwatch, show that we offer. It's 5 p.m. PDT. They basically talk about everything Overwatch, whether it's, Overwatch League, North American contenders, if it's Overwatch, they'll talk about it. I'm sure this week you guys will probably talk about some of the skins in the upcoming event, like what's going on with that. Whatever.
Just a quick note, we'll also be covering the South America and Australia finals for contenders this week.
There you go. So you get a little bonus there. And then Thursdays and Fridays, whenever we get on, we typically do host streams. My tank account that I've been leveling is ready to go for competitive. And, if these guys don't catch up quick enough, I'm just going to do placements without them. So
you wouldn't.
I mean, I might.
Well, I know what I'm doing tomorrow.
Oh, there you go. Hosting Owl by the Numbers with Blazing Bob and Edinar and Ramses, or Julian Goulian, as he will now be known, per Blazing Bob. If you'd like to support the show, you can do so on the Patreon. We kind of already went over that, but we have tiers from $1 to $10. Definitely check that out, patreon.com/Owl Network. You can find me on Twitter at SpiderGD, and if I'm on Twitch, I'm here. Slambo, who was swallowed by the audio abyss because his mic decided that it didn't want to listen to his crap tonight. You can find him on Twitter at SlamboOverwatch and tell him that you love him and you miss him, and hopefully he'll be back next week. So, Totem, send us home. Where can they find you?
Well, you can find me at Totally Drunk CTR, where I will most likely be sending more Millhouse gifts over to Slambo as he's in the audio abyss. So look forward to having him back next week. But guys, thank you so much again for tuning in tonight on Overwatch League Network. Again, this has been episode number 64. I am your host, Totally Drunk, joined by my co-host, Spider, and we will see you guys back potentially tomorrow, if all things go well, for our live show of OWL by the Numbers. And if not, then we'll see you on Wednesday. Guys, have a good night.
Thank you for listening to the Overwatch League Network. Be sure to follow the show on Twitter at OWLN Show. The theme music for OWLN is the main theme and victory theme guitar remix by Michael Mack.